Hi painters, here we are with our palette mixed up and our still life materials. Yours will be set up in front of you. I just wanted to show you the relationships of these colors to our palette, which is just some mixtures, as you've seen, of violet and yellow and white to make some chromatic grays. Here we see the yellow in its pure saturated form, and we want to sort of look at that and think about how that might relate to areas of our lemon in its purest saturated form. We also might start to see relationships even to a lot of these neutrals that we mixed that still head toward the yellow side. And my guess is that you'll probably, be using some of the warmer variations, like red violet with that yellow, to get some of the more orangey tones in these lemons. Obviously there's even a little bit of green, and we know how to make green with violet and yellow now. So I'll put this aside, and then also your tin foil, which is obviously going to reflect differently everywhere. And you're going to start to notice all different things in that, and the reflection of your lemon on that, as well as the reflection of your paper, and seeing how violet's going to reflect in there. So I don't know if you can see that very well, but you'll see that in the other video. So these grays here are the beginning of mixtures that you're going to see in there, but I do want to mention that after the last video, I did want to mix a very neutral couple of grays, and that I think the best mixture for certain neutral grays that you just feel you want to be neither violet or yellow would be the ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson and cadmium red violet. So if you mix a red between the cadmium red and the ultramarine blue and the alizarin crimson, and then add a mixture of the ultramarine blue into that, you're going to get a kind of violet that tends to neutralize slightly more so than if you added just one of each of those reds to either blue. So that's just my hint, how I got toward these students. I've been working with this palette with students for years. People always find it somehow, but I thought I'd give you a little shortcut this time since I'm videotaping. To move on to the actual painting, I wanted to invite you to tape whatever kind of rectangle you would like to. I've kind of made a more square rectangle for this one. You're welcome to tape off any shape that you want. You could tape an oval or draw an oval and stay within that line. You could tape a hexagon. Again, you can do a square, or you can just stick to your rectangle. It's absolutely fine. I just wanted to let you know that because these are canvases that are not adhered to anything, you have control over the shaping of that canvas, and that's something that all artists think about, is what scale am I going to use and what shape canvas will suit my subject best. So sometimes you just grab what you got, but you can use your tape and do whatever you like shape-wise there, all right? So last time we started, we used a neutral to find an underpainting, and that is, again, the way that I tend to work. You can do both, using your pencil to draw things out first, then do underpainting, but I would like for you to, in some respect, use underpainting. Some of you might like to go back to using color underneath as your underpainting to mark transparently where you're seeing certain colors, and that's absolutely great too. Some folks even use the reverse colors. So if there's a yellow in the center, some people will use a violet and vice versa. So a complementary system, reverse of underpainting. So if you want to get fancy, you can do that too. I'm going to just begin by using a neutral underneath here, and I think I'm just going to go with this one so you can see how this works. And you can see it still has a slight violet tinge to it, and really just gesturing in. I'm using a round brush right now. It's called a round that has this shape. So you can draw as well with your underpainting and your brush, even if you're using the reductive method. And really trying to think about not just the lemon shape, but the shapes that are being formed around it by the tin foil. And if you don't have very much drama in that, try to find some in your still life. Try and reorganize your still life where you're seeing shapes that are interacting with each other that you enjoy. You're also finding in your underpainting what scale you would like the figure and the ground to be. How are shapes placed within the shape of the substrate. And so that's really important in the underpainting stage for me, to kind of check out and see how things work in terms of the scale and finding the big shapes. One of the nice things about tinfoil is it really gives you a lot of geometry to play with, and you can accentuate that geometry if you want. You can de-accentuate it and find more of the organic or rounded forms within it. It's really up to you to play with this subject matter. I get all kinds of different end results from this, and that's why I continue to teach with these two materials. You'll notice that in the still life you don't actually have something that is purple or violet, and you are really tasked to find the subtle violet in reflection from the reflected paper, and that is intentional too, to kind of really think about desaturation and chromatic grays in relationship to complements. And this is a fairly cool underpainting. I wanted to show you too that you can use a clean brush and kind of pull in lights. If you want to change things, you can add more water to something so that you don't feel beholden to that. You can take your rag and pull out lights and make changes this way. In. Maybe find some of your area again. So that's how I like to find my form within a subject, is to find it, wipe it down, find it again, maybe refine it a bit. Especially when you're dealing with something with a lot of complex shapes, I like to sort of find where the darks might lie in the underpainting to help me organize the painting. So finding the shape of light and shadow as it intersects with the edge of your composition is really important in the beginning, and kind of to reestablish throughout the painting. You might find things getting kind of detailed and persnickety, and you've been over in one area the whole time. make sure again that you look at the whole as much as possible, right? If we get stuck in one area, we might think we have it, and then we look around and we think, oh gosh, I kind of been establishing a wrong value system, or that's completely out of proportion, and now I've spent 2 hours on it. So try and move yourself around. Of course, that being said, some of you are going to be more concerned with getting the proportions and the shaping as you see it, and some of you are going to struggle with that, and some of you are going to intentionally ignore some of that in favor of other things that you're looking at and paying attention to, and that is just fine and something to be aware of, and something to make us aware of in your reflection of your work when you tell us about your process. And again, with the underpainting, some of you are going to really get detailed with the little shapes that you see right off the bat, and some of you are not. And I probably, in the name of, time, for the sake of time, won't do that. Some of you, again, after you have this down, you might have drawn it out first and used your colors to underpaint. Some of you might choose to use, in addition to using a neutral, to start placing in sort of a wash of where you see some of the colors, an approximation of some of these colors. So you see I'm using a wash with the desaturated yellow in the shadows and in some of the areas of the lemon, and I might note where I see that in reflection as well. And of course you can manipulate that. I don't generally like to add too much white in the underpainting, so by going for the color that I'm really seeing up here, I'm doing something I don't usually do. But there's, that the only harm in that is that it gets the whole underpainting so milky, and you kind of lose your sense of value in there. So just be aware of that. And I'm just getting the first look at what kind of color is going on with this painting. And I might want to try and head toward a more saturated version of that lemon, just like in the others. I think kind of getting the punch of the color that you see in its more saturated form, as well as your darks, getting those placed in and understood at the minimum is a good idea. So I'm adding a little red violet to try and get a more warm yellow. The yellow you have, the cadmium yellow, is a cadmium yellow light, and I think I may have mentioned during the mixing of the color wheel that the reason I give you that one is because you can add sort of an orange or in this case a red violet to deepen and warm up a yellow. So if you have to buy one, buy the lighter, and know that you can use your red and different violet mixtures to manipulate it. And this is where you can already start to build more opacity and thickness in the paint. Again, I don't always end up with this round brush in the beginning, but I seem to be going for that at this moment. I probably will, just use it to plunk down some of these yellows and then move along. I might mix up a bigger pile of this because I seem to be wanting it. So here's where I'm being lazy and just mixing with my brush. That's all right. But you will see that you will save more paint if you don't mix with your brush. So be aware. Another thing to remember is to get distance from your painting. So if you find yourself hunching in and over your painting for long periods of time, if that's the way you have to be set up even, make sure you step back every once in a while, or as often as possible, really. It's great for your, neck and back and everything too, but you need to get distance so that you can see, again, the whole of the painting. So I'm gonna switch to some larger, different shaped brushes so that I can start mixing some of these grays and violets as well, or just plunking in what I have and seeing what fits. So, these kind of darker, and you're looking at them, and by virtue of them even being next to the yellow, they're going to come across as more violet because of that simultaneous contrast. And again, it's a good way to get a first look at your color and your composition. Think about how you might need to mix up more or differently because of your particular setup. And if you're working, from your tinfoil, if you might notice that it changes when you move your body. If you move and look at it from one side to another, that's going to change the way that you see your still life. It's going to change a lot of things, but it also, especially with a reflective object, is going to really change even the way things break up into shape. So be aware of that as well. And try to pick a spot that you go back to each time that you're painting. Okay, so I might find that I need a little bit more, and you can see I'm using this violet that I mixed with the ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and some cadmium red together. This is just with white and how I might add yellow to that. And that gets this kind of gray. I might start plunking in. See, that's too grayed down, but it works for over here a little better. Mixing in between those. And where you might find that you need more bluish tone to something, and that might be where you need to mix up another blue violet. I feel like the violets I have up here aren't very blue. They're pretty neutral, so I might have to go and mix some of those up to get my more bluer chromatic grays. So that's a note I'm making. Okay, so I think this should, now that you're on your third painting, I think the application, the process you've watched, and you also have your own way of putting down paint and thinking. I'm not sure that you need to continue to watch, you know, this particular tutorial, me going through the whole thing. And I would really like to see how you end result this. I'm very curious to know how everyone will compose, and just even understanding the mixtures that you're working with. Remember to use a couple of brushes as you go, and to try and keep remixing and mix more paint if it's not working for you, if these colors start to be limiting to you and you need more. Like I said, I know I would want to mix up some more blue violet, to just stop, pause, and get that going. Work the whole painting at the same time. So notice, you know, if you're seeing something outside the lemon area, and you wouldn't, you're kind of, most people think of like the lemons and then the things around the lemons. So figure, ground. This is an effort to show that the figure and the ground are one, all right? And so if you, the earlier you can see that and start working inside and outside the image, the better. Where you're noticing even the most subtle interactions between the two. Okay. You keep going. If you're not happy with your still life as you're painting and you want to alter it a little bit, go ahead. At a stage like this, it's still pretty early, right? Haven't invested too much time, and if there's something that looks awkward or not awkward in a good way, then go ahead and shift it. So you might, you know, use two different brushes, one for your grays, one for your more yellows. You may have more. Another thing I do notice sometimes with this palette is that people limit it a little too much. They find one gray and they use that all over. Try not to do that. And I'm finding even this palette to me is looking just a little too monochromatic. Again, I want to mix some of that bluer violet and enter that into the scene. You can see I'm working from my darks to my middle tones to my, and leaving those lightest lights for now. And I think that's, you know, there's somebody named John Singer Sargent who was a famous, amazing painter, and he worked alla prima, and which means all at once. He would do this amazing painting in one sitting, actually several sittings, but the last result was from one sitting. And he talked about not going for false highlights. And so in a reflective image that has a lot of highlights, try and find the supporting cast, try and find what's going on around those highlights first and build to the highlights. That way you will know that they are not false, therefore placed in there just by the knowledge that light things are gonna kind of make you feel as if you've got it. The light things are in some ways the dessert when you get to that. So that's my little advice about highlights. And again, you'll notice I'm just working the whole thing, right? I'm working all around the subject. You can get as detailed as you want. You can get in there later and have all kinds of fun with texture, with the detail inside the lemon. if you like that. You absolutely don't have to do that. But I do like the lemon as subject, as a live element and as an organic element and as an everyday sort of element for you to study and look at and reinvent for yourself. All right. Okay. So I just went for kind of a light, and I already regret it because I don't think it's quite right. All right, I'm gonna stop and I'll continue painting on this and share some result, but I think this ought to begin your journey on the palette and using the palette for this project. All right, don't forget about this kind of weird color too, that browny sort of neutral that should be reflecting in your still life as well. All right, I'm having a hard time leaving this, but I will continue. All right, have fun, guys.